Have you ever wondered why your relationships feel so hollow, or why life seems dominated by external validation? Carl Jung posed a simple but profound challenge. What part of you are you letting die every time you adapt? What if your deepest struggle isn't just about society, but about your soul? Modern love feels fractured in ways that are hard to name, yet impossible to ignore. Relationships, once imagined as places of mutual understanding and acceptance, now often feel like arenas where something vital is missing. Maybe you notice it when you reach for your phone, swiping through faces and profiles, hoping for a spark. But instead of fulfillment, you end up feeling more isolated. This isn't just your private struggle. It's a symptom of a much larger shift in how we relate to each other. The truth is, many people today feel disconnected, uncertain about what love or even basic connection is supposed to look like. Think about the difference between what relationships could be and what they have become. In the past, there was an expectation that love meant being seen, being safe, being accepted for who you are. Now, every interaction feels like a test. Instead of looking for understanding, people compete for attention, validation, and power. It's as if every conversation has become a silent contest. Who cares less? Who gives less? Who wins? When this becomes the norm, loneliness isn't just common, it's almost guaranteed. Underneath the surface, there's anxiety, defensiveness, and a constant sense of bracing for disappointment. This isn't just a modern invention. Carl Jung saw it coming. He warned that societies lose their way when they lose connection with meaning and the soul. Jung called it archetypal imbalance, when the poles stop attracting and start competing. That's exactly what we're seeing play out. Look at how technology has shaped the way people search for love. Dating apps and social media have commodified connection, turning the search for intimacy into a game of images and algorithms. Now, your value is measured in likes, matches, and fleeting attention. You're surrounded by more options than any generation before, but the result isn't closeness. It's a surge in loneliness. Each swipe is a judgment on a curated image, not on who you really are. Over time, the difference between being seen and being noticed blurs, and the emptiness of these interactions becomes normal. You might not even realize how much this erodes your sense of self until you're left feeling hollow. Jung was clear about what happens when realness and depth are replaced by performance. He believed that much of the relational crisis we see today stems from this archetypal imbalance. Archetypes, the lover, the caregiver, the sage, the warrior, aren't just myths or stories. They're blueprints for what it means to be human. They guide us in how we nurture, protect, contemplate, and love. But when a culture discards or forgets these patterns, people lose access to the qualities that make relationships meaningful. Without these guides, connections feel shallow, transactional, and emotionally empty. This alienation changes everything, especially in the dynamic between men and women. Relationships once held the promise of balance, a meeting of energies, masculine and feminine, both essential. Now, that balance feels broken. Women are pressured to compete, to perform, to prove themselves, while men withdraw or try to adapt, unsure of their place. The result is a battlefield of mistrust and misunderstanding. Both sides feel unseen and unheard, speaking different languages, unable to bridge the gap. Where there could be communion, there's suspicion and self-protection, and the divide only grows. There's another layer to this crisis: the relentless pursuit of validation. Social media has turned moments of intimacy into performances for an invisible audience. Who are people really trying to impress? Is it their partner, their friends, themselves? Or is it the faceless algorithm that rewards appearance over authenticity? Women, especially, find themselves caught in a cycle of seeking approval from a market and an audience that can never truly satisfy. Jung described this as a crisis of the soul, warning that when the feminine essence is suppressed or fragmented, chaos follows. This isn't just a problem for women, it affects everyone because it undermines the foundation of true connection. What does this imbalance look like in daily life? People confuse power with safety and attention with love. Couples enter relationships not as partners seeking meaning, but as competitors keeping score. Who gives more? Who sacrifices more? Who looks better to the world? Intimacy is replaced by a new metric: visibility, status, the illusion of control. Yet beneath it all, the longing for something deeper remains. The crisis isn't that people have stopped wanting love. It's that they've forgotten what love looks like when it isn't filtered through ego and performance. Jung saw these problems as the inevitable result of losing touch with archetypes. When there's no balance between masculine and feminine, when the lover can't unite with the warrior or the sage, relationships collapse. But archetypes aren't abstract theories. They're living patterns that shape every culture and psyche. Without them, relationships lose their grounding. Love becomes attraction without meaning, nurturing becomes obligation, and connection dries up. So if modern love feels so broken, it's not just because of technology or changing trends. Jung would say the crisis goes much deeper. The emptiness in our relationships starts within us, a reflection of our own inner fragmentation. Instead of blaming others, we have to ask how we've let parts of our own essence fade away. If relationships are now battlefields, where did our capacity for communion go? Look around and you'll notice that women today are constantly expected to perform. Whether at work or online, every action becomes another performance for the algorithm. It's not just about ambition or striving for excellence. It's about living under a spotlight that never turns off, where every gesture, every word, every image is judged by an invisible audience. The pressure isn't just exhausting, it's identity shaping. Carl Jung warned us about this, and his words ring even truer now. When the female soul disintegrates, the woman loses her capacity to love and give of herself. The consequences aren't limited to individual women. They ripple outward, distorting relationships, communities, and even the way we define ourselves. The reality is, our culture has built a system where image replaces substance. Women are taught to measure their worth by the attention they attract and the approval they receive. Social media amplifies this, rewarding those who best fit a certain mold while punishing any sign of vulnerability or imperfection. Jung described this modern, performance-driven identity as false empowerment, a kind of energy that burns bright for the crowd but leaves no warmth for the self. You see it most clearly in the influencer who seems to have it all together, only to later admit to anxiety and emptiness behind the curated facade. It's a cycle that looks like independence and control, but underneath, it's just another form of dependence, on likes, on validation, on fleeting moments of recognition that never truly satisfy. This isn't just a problem of technology or trends. It's a deeper cultural shift, one that pushes women to compete in a never-ending war of images. The algorithm doesn't care about your story or your struggles. It only cares about outputs, about what gets attention. Over time, you start to see yourself through that same lens, less as a whole person, more as a collection of metrics. The pursuit of approval becomes a habit, and soon it's hard to tell where the performance ends and the real you begins. Jung saw this as a kind of repression. He argued that when women are forced to suppress their essential feminine side, they don't just lose touch with themselves, they start to masculinize in the worst sense, cutting themselves off from the very qualities that make connection possible. This isn't about rejecting strength or ambition. It's about what gets lost when those traits are pursued at the cost of intuition, empathy, and the capacity to give without expecting return. The feminine essence, as Jung described it, isn't weakness. It's the source of creativity, of nurturing, of deep presence. When that is replaced by a hollow performance, the result is a disconnected persona, a mask that might win applause but never feels at home. You can see this everywhere. Women in corporate settings who feel compelled to adopt hard-edged personas just to survive. Influencers who project confidence but quietly carry anxiety and self-doubt. Even in relationships, there's often a sense of keeping score. Who cares more? Who gives more? Who's in control? The need to perform overshadows the need to connect. Instead of being spaces for mutual growth and acceptance, relationships become battlegrounds for validation and power. Jung warned that this kind of fragmentation isn't just a personal problem. It's a sign that an entire culture has lost touch with the archetypes that give life meaning. Think about the figures that dominate our cultural imagination now. The marketing woman, the hollow empowerment woman. These are parodies, not real people. They're strong on the outside, fragile on the inside, trapped in roles that society rewards, but that never quite fit. Jung would call this being possessed by a complex, living out exaggerated versions of what the world expects, while the truest parts of yourself go unheard. The cost is high: burnout, anxiety, a constant sense of emptiness. The question that comes up again and again is simple but devastating. Who am I underneath all this? What am I really doing this for? It's easy to believe that the answer is to reject ambition or retreat from the world, but that's not what Jung suggested. He believed in balance. Real empowerment isn't about abandoning drive or achievement. It's about integrating those qualities with authenticity and connection. It means knowing when to compete and when to step back, when to push forward and when to listen to your own intuition. It means reconnecting with the parts of yourself that the world told you didn't matter, and letting those qualities guide your actions, not just your image. When women are cut off from their roots, the effects extend far beyond their own lives. Relationships become transactional, marked by competition rather than communion. The balance between masculine and feminine energies, which Jung saw as essential for healthy partnerships and societies, falls apart. Both sides end up unfulfilled, unable to meet each other or themselves in any real way. And when the feminine essence fades, the world becomes a colder, more chaotic place. But this isn't just a crisis for women. The same forces that push women to perform and disconnect are at work on men, too. If women are struggling to reclaim their essence, what about men? Are they really immune to all this, or are they facing their own silent crisis? Something has shifted in how men move through the world. You notice it in the way so many guys hesitate to speak up, avoid risk, or quietly fade into the background when things get tense. It's not just a personal quirk. It's a pattern that keeps repeating, and it goes deeper than most people realize. At its core, this is a crisis of masculinity that Carl Jung predicted long before it showed up in our timelines and group chats. He saw that when men disconnect from their masculine energy, when they become emotionally castrated, they lose something essential. That loss isn't just about missing out on assertiveness or drive. It's about being cut off from the very source of purpose and presence that makes life meaningful. Modern men are trapped in a web of contradictions. Be nice, but not too soft. Show vulnerability, but don't let it go too far. There's this constant pressure to walk a tightrope. Don't be too much, don't be too little. The result is that men end up self-censoring, shrinking themselves to fit into a mold that nobody can actually define. You see it in the way men hold back in conversations, second-guess their instincts, or avoid standing their ground even when it matters. It's not just about avoiding conflict for its own sake. It's about a deep fear of being judged for expressing what's real. Jung called this loss of masculine energy archetypal imbalance. He argued that when men repress their core drives, they abandon the very archetypes that once gave them direction. The warrior and sage, those inner guides that stand for courage, wisdom, and purpose, get pushed aside. Jung put it simply: the warrior represents courage, not cruelty, purpose, not chaos. But when that energy is suppressed, men become passive, unable to defend their values or act decisively. The sage, who should offer clarity and vision, is silenced by constant self-doubt. What's left is a kind of emotional flatline, men who drift through life, never fully awake to their own potential. This isn't just theory. You see it play out in relationships all the time. Men keep their distance, afraid to show too much or care too deeply. They hold back in arguments, not because they don't feel strongly, but because they're scared of being seen as overbearing or insensitive. Even when it comes to ambition or taking risks, there's hesitation. Why reach for more if every step outside the norm is met with suspicion or ridicule? It's not laziness. It's a learned response, a way of surviving in a world that pathologizes masculine traits and rewards men for playing small. Jung warned that this kind of disconnection doesn't just make men invisible, it makes them vulnerable to all sorts of compensations. When you can't express what's inside, those energies don't just disappear. They show up as addictions, compulsive behaviors, or emotional numbness. Maybe it's endless scrolling, drinking, or chasing approval from people who don't even know you. Maybe it's shutting down in relationships, always playing it safe, never risking honesty or depth. These aren't random choices. They're what happens when a man loses his inner anchor, when he's left reacting to life instead of actively shaping it. Think about the friend who never picks a side, the guy who laughs off his dreams, or the coworker who stays silent even when he knows what's right. These aren't signs of weak character. They're symptoms of a deeper wound, men who've been taught to second-guess themselves until there's nothing left but a faint outline of who they used to be. The urge to please, to avoid rejection, to keep the peace at any cost. These are the habits of someone who's been told, again and again, that his instincts are dangerous or outdated. In trying to be acceptable, he becomes invisible. And the world loses something every time a man decides it's safer to disappear than to be real. Jung never argued for a return to cold stoicism or emotional shutdown. He believed that true masculinity is about balance. It's not about being all strength or all softness. It's about having the courage to show up fully, with both conviction and compassion. Inner strength and sensitivity aren't enemies. They're partners. Only when a man can hold both does he find clarity, purpose, and the ability to create meaning in his life and relationships. But look around and you'll see how society ridicules traditional masculine energy while rewarding conformity. Strength is labeled toxic unless it's hidden behind politeness. Leadership is celebrated as long as it never makes anyone uncomfortable. Even creativity, which Jung saw as central to masculinity, is sanitized into predictability. The message is clear. Don't stand out, don't push too hard, don't make waves, and so men retreat. They stop trusting their own drive to create, to lead, to protect. When they do try to break out, when they take a risk or speak from the heart, they're often shut down by a world that doesn't know what to do with authentic masculinity. The cost of this is huge. Jung described how suppressed energies turn into shadow behaviors, addictions, emotional withdrawal, or constant people-pleasing. Without a connection to the inner warrior or sage, men become unmoored, drifting through life with no sense of direction. They react to circumstances instead of shaping them. They become shadows of themselves, haunted by the feeling that something important is missing, but unable to name what it is. So here's the question you have to ask yourself. Have you felt yourself shrinking or self-editing to avoid judgment? That's your inner warrior waiting to be heard. Jung's insight was simple but radical. Those who look outside dream. Those who look inside awaken. The way forward isn't about rejecting sensitivity or doubling down on toughness. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself that have been buried under years of expectation and fear. But what if the problem goes even deeper? What if the real issue isn't just about lost archetypes, but about the hidden parts of ourselves we refuse to face? There's a side of you, messy, uncomfortable, and often ignored, that might be quietly sabotaging your ability to connect, not just with others, but with yourself. The shadow self is not just a psychological concept, it's the hidden engine behind so many of your struggles with connection. Carl Jung described the shadow as the unconscious side of your personality, built from the traits, feelings, and memories you've learned to repress. You don't just hide the parts you're ashamed of, you bury them so deep you forget they exist. But forgetting isn't the same as escaping. These ignored parts of you shape your relationships from behind the scenes, often sabotaging your best intentions. Jung's warning is clear. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The fears and insecurities you try to push aside don't disappear. They run your life from the background. When you find yourself in the same arguments, repeating the same mistakes, or feeling the same disappointments, it's not just coincidence. The shadow is at work, manifesting as patterns you can't seem to break. For women, the shadow often emerges as relentless validation seeking. It's not just about wanting to be liked. It's about performing for a market, an algorithm, an invisible audience. The curated posts, the quest for approval, the exhaustion from keeping up appearances, these are the shadow's fingerprints. You might believe you're in control, but if your worth depends on reactions from others, genuine connection becomes impossible. The shadow's message is subtle but constant. You're only valuable if you're seen as valuable. In chasing that approval, you lose touch with your real self, and intimacy with others becomes a performance, not a meeting of equals. For men, the shadow tends to show up as emotional stagnation and withdrawal. Instead of expressing anger, desire, or even love, men learn to conform, to smooth out their edges, to present a version of themselves that won't be criticized. The result is a kind of passivity, a refusal to risk, to care, or to stand for anything. Addictions creep in, constant scrolling, drinking, gambling. These aren't just bad habits, they're symptoms of a deeper disconnect, a way to numb the discomfort of living out of sync with your own needs and values. The archetypal warrior becomes a shadow of himself, unable to act with courage or clarity. When these shadows collide in relationships, the result is predictable. A woman seeking validation doesn't approach her partner from a place of wholeness. She's looking to him to fill the gaps she refuses to see in herself. A man, emotionally shut down by his own shadow, can't offer the depth or presence she craves. Both are performing, both are protecting themselves, and neither is truly present. Over time, the dynamic flips. The one who entered as the victim becomes the executioner. The woman's need for affirmation becomes a demand. The man's withdrawal turns into silent punishment. Shadow-driven. Actions create a reversal where both partners feel wronged, and the original wound only deepens. You see these patterns everywhere. Relationships that look perfect on the surface but collapse under the weight of unspoken needs. The friend who dominates every conversation, masking insecurity with bravado. the partner who avoids conflict at all costs, mistaking peace for connection. These aren't just quirks. They're the fallout of a shadow left unchecked. Jung insisted that the shadow is not evil. It's simply the part of you you're afraid to face. Maybe you learned as a child that anger was dangerous, so you buried it. Maybe you were taught that vulnerability was weakness, so you put on armor. But what you hide doesn't go away. It grows stronger in the dark, demanding attention in ways you can't control. Ignoring the shadow doesn't silence it. It only guarantees that it will show up where you least expect it. So, what changes when you turn toward your shadow instead of running from it? Jung believed that healing starts when you acknowledge what you've tried to hide. It's not comfortable. It means admitting that fear, shame, or insecurity have shaped more of your life than you'd like to admit. But naming the shadow is the first step to reclaiming your power. You begin to see how your actions, those arguments, those missed chances, those broken connections, weren't just accidents. They were the shadow's way of getting your attention. Integration isn't about erasing the shadow or pretending it never existed. It's about using what you've hidden as a source of strength. The anger you denied can help you set boundaries. The vulnerability you avoided can open you up to deeper love. When you make the unconscious conscious, you break the cycle of self-sabotage. This is where true intimacy begins. Getting there isn't easy. Shadow work requires honesty, patience, and a willingness to sit with discomfort. Journaling, meditation, therapy, these aren't just self-help buzzwords. They're practical tools for uncovering patterns and facing the truth about yourself. The goal isn't to fix or perfect who you are, but to understand and accept every part, even the ones you've spent years avoiding. If your shadow is already shaping your life, you have a choice. Let it keep running the show, or bring it into the light and see what changes. When you start to integrate these hidden parts, you unlock a different kind of strength, the ability to show up whole, not just in relationships, but in every aspect of your life. But there's another layer. Shadow work is only part of the process. The deeper question is about balance. What happens when you stop searching for someone else to complete you and start looking at your own inner masculine and feminine energies? The answer could change everything you think you know about fulfillment and connection. Integration is not just a concept, it's the turning point between living in fragments and living as a whole person. Carl Jung put it at the center of his work. The anima in men, the animus in women, act as guides, challengers, and mirrors. These inner figures aren't abstract. They're the missing pieces you keep searching for outside yourself, the qualities you admire in others but ignore or suppress in your own life. Most people spend years trying to find someone who will fill the gaps left by rejecting these inner energies. But the truth is, those gaps can't be filled from the outside. If you keep outsourcing your missing parts to a partner, you set relationships up to fail when expectations inevitably shift. Think about what happens when you push away your anima or animus. For men, the anima is the source of emotional depth, intuition, and creativity, traits often dismissed as weaknesses. For women, the animus brings assertiveness, logic, and decisiveness, qualities that can feel at odds with what's expected. Culture tells you to hide these sides to fit a narrow definition of masculinity or femininity. But when you suppress them, you don't create balance. You create dependency, frustration, and a constant sense that something essential is missing. This is why so many relationships feel like a desperate search for completion instead of a meeting between equals. Jung's insight is blunt and inescapable. Only when you are whole will you stop looking for halves. If you don't do the work of integration, you will keep seeking in others what you refuse to claim in yourself. The result is a cycle of disappointment. Partners who seem perfect at first, then let you down, not because they're flawed, but because you've asked them to carry a burden that isn't theirs. When your sense of self depends on someone else's presence, every conflict, every absence, every failure feels like a threat to your very identity. That's not love or connection. That's dependency disguised as romance. Integration is the process of reclaiming these lost parts, not by erasing who you are, but by making space for what you've denied. For men, this means welcoming the anima, letting emotion, intuition, and vulnerability coexist with strength and purpose. It's not about becoming less masculine, but about expanding what masculinity can hold. For women, it's about inviting the animus, owning your assertiveness, logic, and independence without feeling you have to sacrifice warmth or care. Integration doesn't flatten you into some bland middle ground. It makes you more vivid, more complex, more real. Let's be honest about what this looks like in real life. Most relationship problems aren't about the other person at all. They're projections, your unmet needs, your unacknowledged fears, the qualities you've disowned, all loaded onto someone else. You criticize your partner for being too emotional or too distant, but what you're really fighting is your own discomfort with those same traits in yourself. When you integrate anima and animus, these projections lose their hold. You stop needing your partner to play a role just so you can feel complete. Instead, you show up as someone who can give and receive without needing to control or be controlled. This isn't a one-time fix. Integration is a practice, a commitment to self-reflection and honest questioning. You have to ask yourself, where do I look to others for what I could cultivate within? Which parts of me do I avoid because they don't fit the script I've been handed? Writing down your answers, tracking your emotional patterns, and noticing where you feel resistance or envy, these are the tools that help you see the outline of your missing pieces. The process is uncomfortable, but it's the discomfort of growth, not the pain of emptiness. You don't become whole by accident. You have to practice embodying both your masculine and feminine energies. If you've always avoided conflict, try speaking up. If you've always hidden your feelings, try expressing them, even if it feels awkward. Each time you step outside your old patterns, you reclaim a part of yourself. Over time, these small acts add up. You become someone who isn't defined by lack or fear, but by a sense of inner alignment. The impact isn't just personal. When you stop looking for halves, you start attracting relationships that are built on respect, not need. You're not searching for someone to save you or complete you. You're looking for someone to share a life with, as equals. The depth and intimacy that become possible in this space are unlike anything you can find through performance or pretense. You're no longer trapped in a cycle of disappointment and resentment. You're free to connect, to create, and to grow. Jung's vision of integration isn't just about individual happiness. It's about restoring a balance that our culture has lost. When you choose integration over performance, you do more than heal your own life. You set a new standard for what's possible in relationships, in communities, in the world. The more of us who choose integration over performance, the more our culture can restore its lost archetypal balance. This is the challenge, one that doesn't end with you, but starts there.